And really, it's just such an amazing poem, I think. But this is the second that I'm doing in a series about words from the angels to the shepherds. And I think Longfellow's poem highlights the disparity between aspiration and actuality, and yet maintains the hope that aspiration is worthwhile. And if you missed the other ones, just on the seats in front of you, you can, the little red thing there, you'll be able to find the podcasts or watch them on YouTube, the messages from here. And if you want to be in our mailing list, that's the blue one. You just fill that in and you can put it in there or give it to someone, and we'll make sure that you're on the mailing list. So it's really suggesting that, that aspiration is worthwhile. And the words that we're looking at just over these few weeks are glory to God in the highest, and on earth, peace, goodwill towards men. And I think, in all the depictions of Christmas, these are the three promises that seem to come across as the promises of Christmas. Last week we talked about peace. How deep down, peace is really what all humans want. A deep peace at the center of our being. And I was suggesting that all activity, good or bad, is actually an attempt to reach that peace. It's one of the great Christmas promises, the hope that peace is offered up to us and that each one has to recognize the desire for that within and to realize that this is what is driving us in our lives, the desire for peace, whether it be, whether we're going for fame or we're going for that career or that relationship or that medal or that work of art. It's just peace that we're looking for. And we think that if we get those things, then we will have that peace. If we have that relationship, then I'll be at peace with myself. I think that the realization that peace is the ultimate goal for us all is profoundly transformative. It frees us to live our lives out of that peace rather than going for some poor substitute that, let's face it, never satisfies us. Often, as we talked about last week, it's right at the moment that you let go and stop trying for whatever it is you think will give you peace. At that moment, peace occurs when you stop trying to go for it. And that's often why it's called the peace that passes all understanding. And it's out of that peace that the second part of the promise comes. On earth, peace, goodwill toward men. On earth, goodwill towards men. And we are the earth. The Latin word for earth is humus, Humus. And it's from that Latin word that we get the word human. Those of you that remember Ash Wednesday, dust you are, and to dust you shall return. That's really where it all comes from. And for us, to have that goodwill towards men, first we have to, I think, achieve that peace. That peace is the starting point of where we're going. That peace, it's a peace that doesn't demand. It's a peace which enables love. Enables us to give with no expectation of return. And to have this peace and to be able to express that goodwill is the promise of Christmas. And I think I said last week that people do experience it, but all too briefly. It's, between the Christmas services on Christmas Eve and probably just after lunch on Christmas Day, we're all like bon ami. We're like Scrooge transformed, aren't we? A Merry Christmas, Bob, said Scrooge, with an earnestness that could not be mistaken as he clapped him on the back. A Merry Christmas, Bob, my good fellow. Then I have given you many a year. I will raise your salary and endeavor to assist your struggling family. And we will discuss your affairs this very afternoon over a Christmas Christmas bowl of smoking Bishop Bob. Make up the fires and buy another coal scuttle before you dot another I, Bob Cratchit. That's the sort of peace on earth. Actually, I looked up smoking bishop. I thought, what is a cup of smoking bishop? And funny enough, a cup of smoking bishop is you get an orange and you get a grapefruit and you bake it in the oven. And then you add cloves to it. And then you add port and red wine. And I haven't tried it yet, but I am going to try it this Christmas. It's called smoking bishop. And, we're a bit, Scrooge when he's transformed is a bit like everybody out on the town on that Christmas night and before the reality has hit them, the jolliness and the bonhomie, but it's all too brief. The goodwill that's spoken of here is much more permanent and deep. The original word for the Latin in goodwill towards men is the Greek word iakoia, and it means favor. It doesn't actually mean goodwill, it means favor. And actually, in this phrase, it's not goodwill to each other. Peace on earth, goodwill towards men. It's not like, let's have peace on earth and let's all be nice to each other. That isn't what that phrase means. It is in fact, may God's goodwill be on men. When we hear peace and goodwill towards men, mostly we think that would be nice. We're all nice to each other and have peace on earth. But it actually translates peace on earth and goodwill to those whom the Lord favors. So it's actually an individual blessing rather than something general. It's a different interpretation. It reinforces the idea, and I think it's quite interesting, it reinforces the idea that the promise of Christmas is a personal promise. These promises are personal rather than general. It's not like, peace for everybody and goodwill to... No, it's a personal peace. And the personalness is all wrapped up in, being about a baby and a person. You can see there's a personalness about it. I love that joke, the three wise men coming to Jesus and one of them saying, just remember, this is birthday and Christmas with their presents. It's pretty good. But it reinforces the idea that Christmas is personal. And the incarnation is very personal. It is the Spirit coming into the flesh. I mean, I'm sure you all know this, but, incarnation comes from carno, which is where we go, it means flesh in Latin. We get the word carnivore from it, it's flesh. So the incarnation is the Spirit coming into the flesh. So just as the incarnation relating to Jesus is the Spirit coming into the flesh of the man Jesus, so these Christmas promises that I'm talking about are the promises of a personal peace and God's favor or goodwill. And when you look up goodwill, in the dictionary, it says goodwill or kindness. Kindness as individuals. And interesting word, kindness from kin, meaning family. It's a promise of being kin of God or children of God. That's the promise. It's a personal one. The realization that we are all of one beingness, and this realization of the divine within us, enabling to perceive the true nature of reality. That's what we're talking about here. We then become children of God, born again, as John says, children born not of natural descent. John, the evangelist. I've told this story before. I was traveling in Cyprus with Heather, my wife, once. And we were going past all these sites, and Heather said to me, Paul preached there. I said, Paul who? She said, no, Paul preached there. So anyway, so John was the one that said, children born not of natural descent, nor human decision, but born of God. And that's really the promise here. The favor, the goodwill, the kinness. It's the promise of incarnation within us when we reach peace. When that peace, as Meister Eckhart, who's a 14th century mystic, says, he really defines meditation, and I would use this to define peace. He says, it's when we want for nothing, when we will nothing, and when we know nothing. Wanting for nothing, willing nothing, and knowing nothing. For me, that's the definition of peace, that we're not striving after anything. We don't feel that we lack anything. And we're not trying to understand anything. We're just being. The peace of just being. And that's why I think sometimes it happens when we give up. I talked last week about, my dysfunctionality in terms of, relationships, want to get married and all that stuff. It was only really when I gave up and I thought, no, I'm just going to be as I am. That a different sort of peace sort of descended on me. It did help that I met Heather a year and a half later and we got married. So, but there was a giving upness that did create peace. And I think sometimes, when we don't give up, when we just keep going, because we think we have to get there in the end, it's giving up that allows that peace to happen. We arrive at that point when we open ourselves at that point to receiving the divine, receiving God's favor, receiving the kinship of God. Maestro Eckhart also came up with this fantastic phrase, which I think it's the Christmas phrase for me, and I probably use it every year, but you'll have forgotten it anyway. Or it was 2 years ago. He said, Maestro Eckhart said this in the 14th century. He said, "What good is it to me that Mary gave birth to the Son of God 1400 years ago if I do not also give birth to the Son of God in my time and in my culture?" He says, we are all meant to be mothers of God. God is always needing to be born. And that, for me, puts the spin, the totally correct spin on Christmas. It all tends to be about, the stuff out there, the baby in the manger and all that gear. It isn't. It's a metaphor. It's about our kinship and it's about our peace. And this promise from the angels to the shepherds is to all of us. The peace that comes first is where your ego gets out of the way. The peace that comes first is where your ego gets. So we give up wanting, willing, knowing. And in its place comes the cloud of unknowing. And within that cloud lies our connection with the divine. It's only when we give up, even in the God business, it's only when you give up trying to understand who or what God is that really you start to make that connection. Because no one knows who God is. They all say they do, but nobody does. And really, how could they? You always like thinking us understanding God is like a fish understanding a cash register. You have to explain so much to the fish, who can't speak English anyway, to get them to understand what a cash... that is what the leaps are for us to understand the nature of reality is, and we say God so easily. No one's got a clue. Anyone that does, be suspicious. And just as in meditation, as we focus on the breath or the mantra, we let go of our clasping and our attention that goes in our minds all the time. In meditation, meditation is a process of letting go. It's where I'm going to let go. I'm not going to think about it. I'm going to let go. I'm going to be in my heart. I'm not going to be in my mind. And here the promise is that when we reach that point of peace, we can open ourselves to touch the divine. Or, in more modern terms, we let go of our rational mind and we instead embrace the universal mind or the mind of Christ. And if you think that doesn't exist, it does. There's a rational mind. There's obviously a body mind because you don't think about breathing or beating your heart. There's obviously a planetary mind because the planet gets itself together and it orders itself. There's a universal mind because the planets don't fall out of the sky. There is an order somewhere. And this is about connecting fundamentally with that order. And the premise is that we do have the ability to connect with that order. That's the whole premise of spirituality, that we can connect. And it's actually the whole premise of religion, that we can connect. But religion really is just a cultural interpretation of that connection. Every culture describes it in a different way. And it's this that enables us to tap into the wisdom of the heart when you connect, that guides us. We let go, we fall back into the arms of the divine, and we're then guided on our way. Now, that may sound all a bit prosaic, it might sound nice, but doesn't really equate to actual experience. But I think it does. I think it does stand up to scrutiny. Achieving that peace is no easy thing, but it is possible. And most of us have had glimpses of it, maybe in meditation or on the mountain or after some effort. Props to Jules here, who did the Summit for Life last night and is here today in the chapel. So there's someone who's experienced that peace. It comes after that peace. When we experience that peace, what comes after is what's important. Something will happen, we'll experience that peace. We mostly tend to think that after that knowledge of peace, we might give thanks for it, and then famously, as Nat King Cole said, we'd pick ourselves up, take a deep breath, dust ourselves down, and start all over again. And that does tend to happen. When you experience a deep peace, you don't think, right, I'm going to motor with this. You think, well, that was great. Now, let's start again. Let's do something else. But what if we didn't do that? What if we opened ourselves at that moment and really let the Spirit come in, let the wisdom come in, let go of our agendas, and let the divine come through? And that is how the Spirit works. It comes when it's invited. That's how I write. These people say, how do you write every week? One after the other. This stuff. Where's it come from? And actually, it comes out of my practice. I would do my practice, and then it just comes. It's a wisdom that comes from peace. And we know of writers that, they say that they're a conduit for something else. It comes through me. Many of us have had conversation where the words just happen. Much of what people call second sight comes from this. It's not from the rational mind, it's from somewhere else, and you have to be open to it. I love all those quotes from Einstein. Here's another one. He famously said that I think 99 times and find nothing. I stop thinking, swim in silence, and the truth comes to me. It doesn't come from the thinking. I stop thinking, swim in silence, and the truth comes to me. The trouble is that when we experience that peace, the mind comes in and says, thanks very much for that. I'll take it from here. And you're off again. It always wants to be in control. This is about living in and for the heart, about being open to something more coming through. The mind of Christ, the universal mind. The favor of the divine, whatever you like to call it. The Son of God being born in us in our time and in our culture. We are all meant to be mothers of God. God is always needing to be born. And it's out of that peace that the birth takes place. That's the true promise of Christmas. And it depends upon acknowledging the reality of the divine, glory to God in the highest, the cultivation of that deep peace that lets go of the ego grasping and then receives the connection to the divine. My daughter Jessica was here last week and she said, Dad, given you don't believe much of what's written in the Bible, why do you read it every day? Given you don't believe much, because, I always say, no, I don't believe that. I don't believe this. Why do you read it every day? And, this is why I read it. I may not and probably don't believe that there were shepherds abiding in their fields. I may not believe that the angels appeared to them. But within all that, there is a code as to how to arrive at the experience that is at the center of the Christ manifestation. It's right the way through all this spiritual writing. Old Testament, New Testament. There's a lot of stuff you think, oh, but it's the code is in there. It doesn't matter which religion you pick up, as long as, bona fide world religions. The code is in there to tell you what to do. And that's why I read Scripture and why I read the other wisdom traditions. I read it for the code. And this is the code: peace on earth, goodwill towards men. It's our ability as humans, as part of the earth, as part of that stardust that the universe is created out of. It's our ability to reach deep into our consciousness, beyond our rational minds, through our hearts to a place of peace that is the gateway to the soul. And through this portal within us, we can connect with something that is infinitely greater than ourselves. Wisdom that is 13.7 billion years old. And we can become a part of that evolving consciousness that's bringing things into a new heaven and a new earth, which is, of course, code for the second coming, which is, of course, code for a transformation of consciousness, something that we look forward to in Advent. The second coming is about the transformation of consciousness. We open ourselves to that wisdom. Then we have the experience of being, when we open ourselves to that wisdom, we have the experience of being blessed. We feel the joy within ourselves. We know that we're connected, and we act out of the love that's at the center of all things. And when we have that experience, we can say with Longfellow, God is not dead, nor does he sleep. The wrong shall fail, the right prevail, with peace on earth, goodwill to men. Come in. So always just want to give everyone an opportunity to come back at me if you want to, or say something, share an experience, disagree. I always like to say we give out this information with the willingness to be wrong. So it's okay if no one does, but when anyone would like to make a contribution at all. Thank you.
I was struck when you read the poem about, I've always sung that song by rote, learned it as a little girl, but I never got the story behind it, and it's so relevant today. And I have interviewed 60 women peacemakers all over the world, and one of the things they say, when I say, what's your definition of peace? Or what would you tell a young person that wanted to become a peacemaker? And I said, and they had two answers. One was, you've got to forgive. Because if you don't, you're stuck in ego, just like you said. And the other answer is, I can't be totally at peace until I know this will not happen again, until justice is there. So it's sort of, for those women, it was a double play, sort of.
Thank you. That was really lovely. I really appreciate that. Thank you. Yes. Anybody else? Yes, Leslie.
First of all, I just want to say how grateful I am to be here, and that I bring myself here with what you are bringing to me. I'm just so grateful for that, and that I choose this.
Thank you, Leslie.
When the poem was being read and they said the wrong shall fail and the right prevail, is that right? I found myself, the polarity of that, and I've been sitting here thinking about that because everybody has a different idea of who's right and who's wrong in the world. And it's, I guess I was going to ask you about that, but what came to me was just the faith in that. You don't have to know who's the right and the wrong, because sometimes sometimes it doesn't look so good, and it's easy to blame and do all that. But it seems to me that everything's working as it should. To feel that in that peaceful place.
Yeah.
Because sometimes it's unbelievable. But I don't know if you have a response to that.
Yeah, I do actually, yeah. I mean, this weekend I've been thinking about something, and I decided not to do a course on this when I started thinking about it. And what I was thinking about this weekend was the myth of evil. When you realize that absolutely every person is deeply looking for that peace at the center of all things, and when you realize that the overwhelming force for everything and order in the universe is a force for good, is a force for love, then to me it speaks of evil being a myth. I'm not saying that horrible things don't happen to everybody, but evil's an interesting thing. When you look at the word evil, it doesn't, in the original meaning, have all the sort of demonic, understandings around it. Evil actually originally, in the sort of older days, just meant not very good behavior. If someone was evil, they were just not behaving particularly well. It was a description of not good behavior. And we have now developed this theology of evil, which supposedly matches the theology of good, which creates this random polarity that has it's no truth to me, that sort of polarity. We're supposed to, if we are living in this idea of non-dual consciousness, which is what we espouse here, which is really that there is a oneness of all things and we are all part of that. There is no room for evil in that. And the evil that we speak of is I think, a myth. It is what we create for ourselves in order to give reason for the very not good behavior. We say there's a reason, and we develop that myth to such an extent that we create something called the devil. We create this personification of evil. And it's all not true. And, I don't know what is true. I can't really, but that doesn't resonate with me. And that is where I feel that peace within that conflict is knowing that somewhere there is an ununderstandable resolution that is possible, that comes from that desire for peace on all sides, if it could only be acknowledged at the personal level. Yeah, so. Anybody else? Dee Dee, yeah.
Well, I don't want to express a thought. I want to ask you to clarify. I've got that quote about we're all Marys.
Marys?
Marys, and we are...
Or what?
You said,
Oh, no, we all birth the mothers of God.
we're mothers of God.
Mothers
We're
of God,
all
yeah.
Birthing, that's
Yeah.
what I want to know. Thank you. I've got to remember this.
Yeah, all birthing. We're all mothers of God. Yeah, each of us is,
Yeah.
it's the challenge for each of us to birth that divinity in our lives. Isn't that the challenge, really? To birth that divinity in our lives. And by transforming ourselves, we transform those around us. And we connect. Our purpose here is to connect in that way. And to work it out together. I mean, the things that are said here, we work it out together. I come up with a bit of stuff. And then, it's a together experience. We create that. That's what we try and do here, is birth that. So thank you.